I'm standing on the shoulders of the ones who came before me. I am stronger for their courage. I am wiser for their words.
This year, 2020, marks the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, guaranteeing and protecting women's constitutional right to vote. Because of the early suffragists who spent years crusading to secure this right, we thank them today and would like to reflect on the local movement in Herkimer County. It all started right here in New York State in Seneca Falls in 1848, where the first Women's Rights Convention was held. Well-known figures such as Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Frederick Douglass were in attendance. A Declaration of Sentiments was signed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. They addressed issues like rights to education, owning property, guardianship of their children, and the right to vote. 3 years later, social reformer Susan B. Anthony would join Elizabeth Cady Stanton in promoting women's rights across the country, and in 1869, they formed the National Women's Suffrage Association. Locally that year, the Journal and Courier reported of a women's convention being held at the Herkimer County Courthouse with Zenas Brockett of Mannheim, the noted abolitionist, leading the meeting, and Mrs. Vienna Rice of Fairfield, and mother of 9, as chairwoman. She and her husband Thomas were remembered in their son Eliezer's obituary as fearless pioneers in every good work. At this convention, a resolution adopted stated that women has all the rights and responsibilities of a human being. Susan B. Anthony traveled extensively across the country, giving as many as 75 to 100 speeches per year in favor of women's suffrage. On September 20th, 1880, she gave one of her famous speeches, "Women wants bread and not the ballot," at Loftus Hall in Frankfort. In 1894, Anthony would come again to the area when New York State was scheduled to hold a convention to revise its constitution. Women suffragists lobbied for a place at this convention to support an amendment that would grant women in New York the right to vote. Mass meetings were held, including one in Herkimer at the Grand Opera House on April 18th and 19th, with Susan B. Anthony and the Reverend Anna H. Shaw, another leader in the suffrage movement, addressing the audience. Committees were formed to canvass the county with petitions urging the Constitutional Convention to extend the voting franchise to women. At the conclusion of the hearings, the convention voted on the suffrage amendment. 98 opposed it, while 58 voted in its favor. Denied. Although suffragists had lost the battle, the fight continued. Later that year, a Herkimer County Political Equality Club was organized, along with a local chapter in Ilion, to join the already formed clubs in Little Falls and Frankfort. These clubs were affiliated with the National Suffrage Organization to empower activists in small towns and rural areas. Noted suffragist Mary G. Hay, who helped create women's suffrage groups across the country, was their guest speaker at the Ilion YMCA on September 26, 1894. By the turn of the century, women were beginning to play more of a role outside the home, with 1/5 of the labor force being female and thousands more off to college. As other states and territories in the country were giving women the right to vote, first with Wyoming in 1869, Colorado in 1893, Utah and Idaho in 1896, Washington in 1910, and California in 1911. It made franchise for women seem possible. Supporters were now going out into the street, making the movement more visible with suffrage buttons and posters, and wearing a suffrage sash and marching in a parade. At the same time, Illinois women were celebrating their state giving women the right to vote. The first parade locally was being held in Utica on June 10, 1913, with women from Little Falls, Herkimer, and Ilion in attendance. It received much attention in the Utica newspapers, but fell flat in our local Herkimer Citizen, whose only comment was, "The parade in Utica last week was something of a frost." The average lady rather look on and see her sister walk rather than take part in the procession herself. A popular suffragist symbol became the Torch of Liberty, inspired by the Statue of Liberty, lobbying for women to have the liberty to vote. In 1915, a Liberty Torch, organized by Harriet Stanton Blatch, daughter of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, made its way across the state by automobile to help build support for a statewide referendum on women's suffrage in November. It passed through our area on July 7th, brought by Harriet Blatch and Mrs. Maria Houghton of Ilion, had the privilege of carrying the Liberty Torch from Little Falls to Utica. The Utica Herald-Dispatch had nice coverage with a picture of Mrs. Blatch detailing her tour through the valley, including events in Herkimer County. There was a small mention in a lower corner in the Herkimer Citizen on page 3, giving the briefest of details. Their attention for that July 13 issue was on something out of the ordinary, featured on the front page. A woman postmistress in the county, Miss Edith Nichols of Norway. Despite the statewide rallies, parades, and even in the church services, as Reverend Moulton did from the Dowsville Universalist Church, urging his male parishioners to vote for women's suffrage, the amendment was defeated in November. They may have suffered a defeat in 1915, but the New York suffragists became even more determined. Stay tuned for part 2 in the suffrage movement in Herkimer County.